because I think it's going to be very valuable. So you were saying the employment law.
Yes, so a disclaimer in the first place is that I'm not a labor lawyer or public law lawyer, so my knowledge in this field is limited. But so far, my questions are that normally to employ a person, you're subject to labor law requirements, which implies a certain expenses for the company hiring an employee. Then there is another possibility, and I'm talking in Spanish law, but I assume it's kind of similar in most EU countries. The other possibility would be self-employment. For self-employment, there are also certain requirements. You have to pay certain kind of taxes, and you have some costs to cover in order to be self-employed and provide your services as such. And then when you're talking about public administration, you have an additional requirement. And it is that public administration can hire in two ways. Can hire properly as public function. In this case, you are subject to an additional rules which are more strict that are public law. These employees are more protected and typically have better conditions than in the private market. And then sometimes, because that's so strict, even the public administration wants to avoid their own rules. So they constitute or form private companies. These companies are private and are governed by private laws as any other private company, but they have the particularity that the capital is all public. So the owner would be the state or the administration. In these cases, the requirements are labor law, only labor law requirements. So from this perspective, that is why I asked whether this public database of tasks are comprised of tasks that normally the public administration does, or tasks from the private market, from companies that need something and they post a task they need to get done through this public database.
All right, so thank you very much, Jose. This was very interesting to hear because, of course, we don't have the expertise on the public administration or the legal aspects of procurement. I think first of all, we can take out the element of the financial reward. So there is no monetary reward per se. I think that's one big change we want to introduce, is that if people do something through that system, they get a voucher, which is not something you can get, put tax on. Maybe behind the scenes when the government makes an arrangement with a partner, and then for the vouchers, there's some special tax system that will be applied, but it doesn't get transferred to the people who will be receiving it. And then that voucher could be redeemed against either medicine or food or some other product of partner organization. That way we can actually, simplify the whole, being self-employed to get a task and then fulfill it and then pay taxes on it. Then another aspect that you mentioned was this all just escaped my brain.
Well, maybe I can fill in with one there.
Yes, thank you.
Because hi, by the way.
Hello.
And thanks for connecting. This is a contingency type of measure. So, and it is for people who are normally self-employed. Because the people who have unemployment, if they are let go, normally, depending on the country, there are indeed some regulations that protect them for a longer time than a freelancer. A freelancer does not have that luxury many times. So it becomes a very important thing, because the freelancer in the end is the consumer of what big corporations do and what big companies do. So in that sense also maintains the flow of the economy going on. What is important is to prevent that some companies might abuse of the situation and get some work done that they should have with an employee, but instead getting it this way, right? That is something that needs to be just for fairness. for fairness, sorry.
Yeah.
My accent is also very bad.
It's all right. Yeah, I can understand.
So you see, at the beginning we are thinking, okay, it has to be a governmental fund, and probably public institutions should be the first to start the pilot, and then it could eventually maybe expand by. I was seeing now, and we have a brainstorm set with post-its that I have on our table, and it includes the possibility that maybe can create cooperative type of organizations inside of the system.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And another point, I just remembered that you mentioned is employment contract. That is something that we definitely want to avoid. So because it's a contingency measure, like Massimo said, we want to avoid the 3 to 6 months of bureaucratic process where people have to be interviewed, screened by CV, and so on and so on. No, the task has to be so simple and so minimized. So like 10, 15 hours should be the top for one task.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it has to be kind of a part-time thing, not a full-time, because otherwise the person does not have the possibility to keep looking for something to do. Okay. You don't want to drain them in time.
Yeah, but if you, for example, if we imagine the situation where a person in 10 to 15 hours of completing one task online, remotely, without any faff of being onboarded and the rest, can earn himself, I don't know, let's say 15 hours.
Well, what is the basic for shelter and food?
Yes, can you earn himself, for example, at least 2 or 3 times for grocery shopping, or maybe a week of grocery shopping, or 2 weeks, I don't know. It depends on how the rates will be set. It's not up to me right now. But then you actually provide yourself for the next 2-3 weeks of food so that you can continue looking, or of rent, that you can continue looking for the job. So it's like that.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
There is one complex element, which is with the landlords on the regards to real estate and rent, because there you have some complications. Some landlords are the rent they get from their properties is their main source of income in many cases. So there also the state has to think about some subsidized way to help the people in not having, especially for private rental, for residential. They should be helped one way or another.
So in Spain, for example, there are subsidies directed to these people in terms of shelter and basic needs. They are basically some small amounts of money given to people who comply with certain requirements. In the regard of shelter, we're talking about rent and about mortgages. Both things are not, I don't remember the word in English, but are not things that you can do, but you need money to pay for them. Then I don't know whether it fits in this structure you are describing.
It's asking too much.
Yeah, maybe we can simplify for the moment, indeed, to just focus on products that people can get from the local supermarket chain. For simplicity, because indeed, if we try to include all the targeted groups and all the potential things they need to cover, then we just lose ourselves in a very complex operation.
When we talk about shelter, you need money, you need cash. And then this is something that this idea so far is not intending to provide. So it's intending to provide goods, basic need goods, which I think is good. It's a good idea and it's much needed for sure. Then there is one element that you mentioned that is a contingency measure, and that it should be applied temporarily. So it's important to take into account that even temporary contingency measures need to comply with pre-existing laws. So law is not going to be temporarily unapplied. It's going to apply as usually, unless governments take certain measures, as they are doing. They are taking certain measures, temporary measures, moratoriums, for example, changing ordinary laws for 3 or 4 months till this thing goes away, partially at least. But this depends on the government, not because this is something urgent or in good faith. It's not going to apply existing regulation. So everything is going to apply as usual, despite the possibility of benefiting from some changes that governments are issuing at the moment. Therefore, you have to comply. In case you would provide services, you would need to comply with ordinary requirements in terms of be self-employed, declaring yourself as such, and paying corresponding taxes. Now, the question of it's not money what you get, but it's goods. I think deserves to be looked at, and I think that is an interesting approach that could simplify a lot everything.
Because of course there are some areas that become a little bit tricky, right? If at the moment you introduce money, so it was easier to have an exchange thing. Now for services, like for example the advisory on the taxes or the declarations during this time of emergency, the government of the country is the one that has to take into account to do exceptions if they want to, and to create a certain type of code that establishes that this job is made on this specific type of program.
Yes, but I guess that you want to propose a business proposal or business project that doesn't depend on future changes, that can be workable today with the current regulatory environment, because I wouldn't see that is something feasible to make a project that is dependent on some political changes that you don't know whether are going to occur or not.
It's too much risky.
Exactly. So I would suggest to make a proposal that is possible under current circumstances in at least some countries. Maybe you cannot cover all of them because different countries have different regulations in this regard, and they are changing it very quickly. So I think it's worthwhile to focus maybe on a few examples, because every project is different. Some projects are not so dependent on law. Usually people undermine the importance of law, and I don't think that is a bad idea because I'm a lawyer. But I think it is important to understand to which extent our project is affected by regulation, whether we are getting into a very regulated environment, because if that's the case, we have to fulfill this regulation, even when we have good purposes. So I would suggest to focus on a few cases, a few countries, and try to understand how to make it work under that current regulation. The problem with labor law is not only that it's something made for exchange, labor for money, but it's also something to protect the employee in their work. So if a person is going to work for another person or another company, this work entails certain things, risks, expenses, and therefore you should be properly covered for this kind of costs you are assuming as an employee. So the fact that you don't get money in exchange doesn't determine that you can escape labor law. In my first opinion, I think it's very important for you to try to find a labor lawyer in the network, because that is the main focus of this idea. This is the main area where you want to focus on the legal side at least. It's true that you need a labor lawyer from the market you want to implement your idea, but if you don't have any, just get a labor lawyer from another country and try to make the transition yourself. The problem with labor lawyers is that they have a lot of work these days, because law firms working a lot in this area. So maybe there are not many of those here in this hackathon, but try that. And then what I thought is check a website that is called Freelancers. Freelancers, I don't know if you know it. It's a website basically where you can post works you want to get done, and then there is other people who want to work, and then it's very similar to this. You post your skills, and other people post projects, and then they contact and they choose each other to engage in business. So you would be doing something like that with certain differences, that you are not doing it for profit, that you are not exchanging goods and services for money, but for vouchers. But basically that is the idea. There are some changes of that business model which are based on time. It's more like on the non-profit area. I don't know any examples, but I'm sure if you Google it, you will find several. So these other projects are the same, like Freelancers, which is very, very good website. But instead of money, people exchange time. So I do a service for you that cost me 3 hours, and then I can demand a service from you to me about 3 hours. Or maybe I can get a voucher and get 3 hours from another person.
Do you have a link to that one? Because it sounds very interesting. You had some similar idea of a task exchange. So do you have a link to the...
It's freelancer.com.
No, but is it the one where people exchange hours?
Yes, I don't know the name, but I know it exists. So I'm sure.
Isn't it like Upwork?
Sorry?
Upwork has both capabilities. Upwork.
Up to work? I don't know.
Upwork. Yeah.
Upwork. I don't know.
Yeah. UP work. That's a quite advanced on that. So basically, since we are targeting the population of mostly precisely freelancers and independent professionals, they are already registered as a business.
Yes.
So that's one thing that we felt kind of comfortable, right?
That is good.
Yes. Yeah. Although in some countries, for example, in the Netherlands, if 80% of your income during the year comes from a single customer, that might be a reason for being audited for that customer, because you might be taking advantage of the freelancer.
Yeah.
So there are some of these things, but that they can change a lot between different countries, right?
Exactly. That's why I think, because this idea is very affected by regulation, and it's working in a very regulated area. It's an area very politically sensitive, and I'm not political expert, but I think that you should be also conscious about that. I think many people is going to be skeptic about these kind of approaches, because it's touching on a very ideological field, the field of labor and work. And that's why it's very regulated, because the state want to have a word, a saying in that field. And so you want to make sure that you don't make people feel uncomfortable with the idea or the possible outcomes deriving as a consequence of the idea. Because there will be, I assume, many people who will say, well, if these people are vulnerable, economically speaking, then they need to get a subsidy. Let's stop with ideas of make them work so they feel that, so we feel that they deserve to get a subsidy. They need a subsidy, and the state need to provide it. So I think, in my opinion, we want to make clear that this is not a substitute, but a complement to subsidies by the state that can reach people that normally cannot qualify as beneficiary of those subsidies. And also, I have just two final remarks. One thing is that one form I envision this could be implemented is a kind of a food bank. The hours idea is kind of a food bank as well, that people exchange their time. But it could also be that you collect donation of goods, of products from several supermarkets or other companies that provide they produce these goods, and they want to, they want to have a good marketing in this moment. So they donate these products, and then you structure a system in which people benefiting from these donated products, they do so because they do something for other people, or they cover some needs from the businesses or vulnerable people. So maybe it's kind of legitimizing donations, legitimizing, private donations to people in need, because they are not just be given things for nothing, but they are being given things because they are also doing some other things they can do for other people. I think that could be a form. And another form that is more business minded would be to focus almost exclusively on self-employed people who were affected by this crisis, that there are a lot. In this case, one of the ideas in the document I really liked was that, what if we can give vouchers or money or whatever to self-employed people who don't have any activity and who maybe cannot perform their activity right now, but I get, I kind of give the money first and get book the service for consuming the service later. So this is good because these people can do something which is needed, but they just cannot do it at the moment. So I can anticipate a voucher, donation, or money, and then I can get that service in 3 months. So these people can survive now and then work a little bit more later, and they can pass on these difficult times. I think that is very good and would make it easier in the legal side, because these people already comply with all legal requirements. You are just booking a service, paying for it first, and having and consuming that service later, and that would help those people, I think.
From the consumer point of view, maybe if it is taken as a reservation cost, as a reservation fee,
yes,
non-refundable.
Yes, something like that.
Like
right?
Airbnb.
Yes. So you are, as somebody wrote, Uber driver. So you are booking something that you know you are going to need. You are going to book 10 trips in an Uber or another kind of service. And then you pay for that now, that you know that is when those people need the money right now because they don't have it, they can't work. And then when they can work, they have to work for you based on that anticipation money you gave in advance, in a period of time, because of course they also need to work for themselves when this passes. But they work 20% more for 3 months, and then they can pay back the loan. It's kind of a loan. Yes. That would make things very easy, I think.
And just a clarification on that last point, is it extended from the prepayment? Is it extended from the private users or from the government?
Can you repeat that?
Well, am I paying upfront for 10 Uber trips right now as a private user or as a government?
Well, I guess anybody could consume that, and I'm sure it's helpful that the government uses that public database. But then again, you need to count with the government collaboration, and maybe you are not going to have that because of what we said before, because it's really sensitive thing, and governments don't want to take risks. They don't want to support projects which outcomes they don't know how are they going to be. So maybe the platform is going to be yours. Maybe you are going to be the platform, and then anybody can go to that platform to collaborate. You are doing that with a good intent. You don't want to really consume that. You don't need that now, but you want to help those people who cannot work now. So you pay for something that you know you are going to need in the future. You consume that in the future. And you participate in that because you know these people need you now, your money.
Yeah.
and you could even merge both things. I mean, you could do both things at the same time, to collect donations from big brands. These companies, I think, they are going to be interested in having good marketing. They are going to be interested in donating food. They are already doing that. In Spain, the lines to get free food from religious organizations has increased dramatically. People need food. They are not covered by state subsidies. So religious organizations cover that need. Then there are people donating those products as well. And I think you can structure that donation and legitimize, so to say, the donation by, by saying, well, we are just not giving, we are giving, but these people are doing something to receive that, which is also good for this, because I think that it gives them dignity. I mean, you are not being given because you cannot provide for yourself. You are being given on the base of something you will give back. You are earning it. You are not being given anything.
Yeah, these are very good points. I thank you very much for taking your time and sharing this expertise with us, because indeed we are not really considering the legal dimension, which is why I reached out. And well, let's hope it's not going to be a showstopper. There's still options that we can pursue, and of course some of them are associated with certain risk that the government would just say, no, that's too much.
We'll see. If we keep it simple enough, at least the conversation should be simple as well.
Yeah.
If we try to fix now problems that we do not have the full visibility, of course it is a good advice to avoid as much as possible a monetary reward, because then it becomes a nightmare, right? Automatically, too many regulations. So thanks for that. It's a very clear message, I think. And let's see, because it can become some type of task exchange or some type of a bank of tasks or something.
And there are people doing that before the crisis. So check how they are doing it, and try to do something on that base, but with your own, of course, identity, right? Yeah. But you can use that experience already, and have they're already compliant structure to do yours. You don't need to. But I think I think and really is very needed. I mean, there is no question that despite all the government subsidies and measures that there are a lot, the people are in need, and that's why you see the reporting in media about food lines, like the lines of people going to religious organizations for food, for basic products. So the need is there, and I think that the will to help in these circumstances is also there, both from the ordinary people and from the big companies. So if you figure out a way to make the structure, try not to assume too many risks, I think that will be a very good idea.
Well, I think we will be working on that. We'll share this video with our team members, and we will incorporate those thoughts and ideas into what we are crafting right now. So thank you very much for that, Jose. And you can stay up to date with what we're doing in the document. We keep updating it, maybe checking on us, tomorrow morning or something. And maybe we'll have some closer version to what we're going to submit. But thank you very much for this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. And I will try to help tomorrow. And if you, do you know the groups where you can find lawyers in the Slack?
No. Probably there's a channel.
Yeah, I will give you 2 channels. So maybe if you want, you can ask generic questions, anybody specialized in labor law. And that will be really helpful, I think. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much for that. Indeed. Yes.
Take care, guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Very good. Thank you.